Yeah. Okay. So welcome everyone. My name's Min, and I'm here with Phoebe, who's also a PAW, and we're going to bring to you a workshop called Steps to a Better First Draft, which is something we thought that might be useful for you at this stage. Um, uh, Given that many of you are AC1 students and you're about to write your first draft of argumentative essay. Great. Um, so Phoebe, can you help me like
Yeah, I
accept?
will.
Yeah, great. So the outline of today's workshop will be that we'll be talking about revising, and then Phoebe will talk to you about editing and proofreading. Then we will share some tips, and finally we will have a Q&A, depending on the length of the workshop, obviously. Uh, so the first thing that I want to discuss is revising. So one question to all of you is that at this stage, at the revising stage, what aspects of your paper should you be looking at? Um, Feel free to speak up, send messages in the chat. You are welcome to do so. So what do you want to do at this revising stage? Anyone? One at all? So feel free to share your opinion on this. Like if you're going to revise your paper, like revise your first draft, what do you usually look at? Is there any specific problem that you want to look at? Anyone? Okay. So Farhan said the Texas paragraph and references pages as well. Okay, that might be a good start. The Texas paragraph, yeah. References pages that might involve also, and these the overall flow. And I think both Farhan and Dee made really great points. Um, so basically, revising involves um, revising involves re-examining your first draft, but you will look at the macro issues. And at this stage, we would like you to keep two things in mind. First is ideas, and the second one is organization, right? So Mia said grammar, but Mia and Shafi also said grammar, and I think that grammar may be at another stage of the process, not the revising stage. So the revising stage, like I said, it will be looking at the more macro issues, the bigger issues. Um, okay, so here, for the ideas, we have four things, and we came up with some questions for you to think about when you do revising. So we have four.
Everyone else, can you still hear me? I think that there has been some, yeah, I thought it was issue on my side, but then I think that there's some internet issue from Ming's side. So please wait a second. I think he will rejoin in a moment. Okay, I will pause the recording for now until Ming come back. Sorry for the technical difficulty.
Great, thanks everyone. So let me pick up where I left off. So there are four things that we want you to focus on at this like revising for idea stage. The first one is rhetorical strategy. So does what you're writing match the type of essay you are supposed to write for the assignment? Um, so for AC1 students who I think are on your argumentative essay right now, you might want to make sure that your paper matches the type, which is argumentative essay, because it's really easy to get it mistaken with your previous cause and effect assignment. So make sure you get that right. So the next one would be arguments. So are your arguments clear and logical? And are they supporting, and are your sentences supporting a specific argument, right? So your arguments, especially your topic sentence for each paragraph, should really be responding to your main topic. And each sentence within your paragraph should support the subtopic as well. You want to ensure that every sentence is connected to the previous one, which greatly contributes to the logic of your argument. So try not to like beat around the bush that confuses the readers. Instead, get straight to the point, because it really helps improve your clarity and makes your argument become more visible. People can see your arguments more easily. Um, so the next one is quality and quantity. So by this, I mean the quality and quantity of information. So are you being too general with your arguments, or is there any irrelevant information that you want to omit? So if you're being too general with your ideas, try to be more specific, because I've been told that it wouldn't hurt to do a little bit more explaining if you think readers might have difficulties understanding what you are writing. Um, and on the other hand, you really want to consider cutting sections where the information is just irrelevant to your information and it might confuse the readers. So the last thing is the analysis. And basically the analysis is the analysis section in the Texas paragraph. I think one of you mentioned the Texas paragraph earlier, and I think it's really important because some students really don't know what the analysis does. So you might want to ask yourself questions. How does the example you just mentioned relate to your argument? And or what does the author mean by that example? Um, so answering these questions will help you get the analysis right. And another thing to keep in mind, that make sure that you are not just repeating what the author's saying, right? Or you're just repeating the previous argument. Yeah, rather you want to explain the implications of the author's finding and how that applies to your argument, right? So that's about the ideas. And now we're going to the organization section of revising. Um, okay, so there are three things that we want you to look at. The first one is the thesis statement and the paragraph order. So basically this one, you should answer the question like, does the order of the paragraphs correspond with the order of the arguments in the thesis statement? So you would look at your thesis statement, right? And the order that you organize your arguments in the body paragraph. So the way in which your paragraphs are placed should correspond to the order you frame them within your thesis. Let me give you an example. If your thesis statement is something like, this is desirable because of A, B, and C, then the order of the arguments in your body paragraph should also be A, B, and C. They should appear in that particular order. So that's one thing you might want to look at the organization, in terms of organization. So another thing is the location of each argument. Questions like, should an argument be there or someplace else? Or is the organization reflecting the relationship between the arguments? They're really helpful for you in identifying the location of argument, because you need to be mindful of this. Sometimes an argument might fit somewhere else better than the current location. And you also need to be extra cautious if your central argument involves many elements connected to each other, right? So for example, the effects of X of the effects of this problem are A and B, while A and B lead to C. So the organization of your essay should reflect this relationship, how this problem directly causes A and B and indirectly causes C through A and B. So the organization, the location of your argument should really reflect the relationship between the arguments. And the last thing is the transition. So you want uh, to ask questions like, have you had smooth transitions or have you highlighted key information in your transition? Because effective transitions really highlight the key information from one paragraph to the next and help to create a logical flows between the ideas. So make sure you have a smooth transition between your paragraphs, as this, I think, would ensure the cohesion of your paper. And there are many ways for you to do it, to be honest. You can mention the previous argument in your next paragraph, or mention the next argument in your previous paragraph, and many other ways. Yeah. So that's for revising. You look at the big issues. And now we're going to Phoebe for editing and proofreading, which is the more, which is the smaller issues within your paper. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you for that. And before we move on to the next part about editing and proofreading, we would want to ask you guys a small question, whether you guys know the difference between editing and proofreading. So what is the difference that you guys think there are between like editing and proofreading? Because a lot, I think usually we have like just have these two really mixed up together. We don't really like separately tell them apart. So it could be a bit confusing when we have like two things like editing and proofreading as processes about writing. So if we could actually tell them apart, based on their, based on like the focus, the functions, it's gonna be better for you guys. So Tatiana, editing is for mistakes. True, editing for mistakes, but proofreading will proofread for mistake also. Okay. Okay. So I think you guys kind of get the ideas, but to put it in a more like in a more concise manners, we're gonna say like when you do during your editing process, usually you would have your attention directed towards two main things. The first thing is clarity, and the second thing is like the sentence structure that you have. While for proofreading, it would require you to like read more closely, like scan more closely through your essay. For like perhaps you want to closely scan through your whole essay for those mistakes or errors, like whether they're like typos, misspelling, or any like mistake with your punctuation, formatting issues, stuff like that. So proofreading, in other words, it's gonna be like much, you're gonna like focus on more like micro issue. Like gonna like have to closely scan through every line of your essay for those mistakes. Let's move on to the next slide. So for editing, right, we have said that for editing, usually we focus on two main things, for the grammar and for a matter of like clarity. I think someone is having their microphone on, right?
Yeah. Can you make me co-host again?
Yeah, whoever is having your microphone on, can you please mute them?
Phoebe, can you also make me co-host?
Oh, again, right? Because yeah. Is it working for you now?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, thanks.
So to resume, for editing, you usually want to do it like right after when you complete your, when you just complete your first draft. So during this process, right, as I said, you want to have your attention on the two main matters, grammar and clarity. And actually, editing they can be done on like multiple levels. But now for this approach that we are showing you guys, we want you guys to focus on those two main things: grammar and then clarity. Yes. So for grammatical errors, like even though that we would try to be as like cautious about our grammar as possible during our writing, it's really hard for you guys to make sure that there's no grammatical mistakes, right? Because we have such a really long paper to write, we have a lot of things to balance. You have to make sure you deliver your ideas in the right way. You have to make sure you're using the right word choice, so that there's a lot to actually take into consideration, right? So that's why usually we would make grammatical errors. And of course, there are some errors that are not that really significant, that they would not actually have any kind of like influence on your overall understanding of your essay. But then there are still some grammatical errors that are major enough that they actually would have effects on the overall understanding of your essay, and you don't want that to happen. So that's why when we do the editing process, you want to look at the overall, like you want to make sure that the grammatical accuracy is ensured during that process. And so when you scanning for those grammatical errors, you have to pay close attention. Like you want to make sure that they won't cause any like disruption to the understanding of your essay. And also, there's one thing that usually for grammatical errors, it would appear in patterns. It means that if you make one mistake at one time, then perhaps it could be repeated in other places as well. So when you actually take one really major grammatical errors, you want to like look out for them in other parts as well. And for the next part, editing, you want to make sure you look at the content as well, right? Because content, it goes without saying that it really matters. It matters a lot for your paper. So you want to make sure that first, the content of your paper, you want to make sure that the writing itself, it satisfies all of the basic requirements of the assignment. So this one is something that I think has been like briefly mentioned in the part of like revising already, but you want to make sure that if it's like argumentative essay, that it should be, then everything that you deliver, it should be in an argumentative manners. If it's cause and effects, that it should be cause and effect. You want to make sure that all of the basic requirements, it has been satisfied already. And also the accuracy of the information that you provided, and how you are, whether or not your arguments, your opinions delivered in the essay, they are well backed up with evidence. That's really important also. For the third and the fourth thing, it's about the overall structure and the structure within paragraphs. These two, actually, it has been, usually we would like do it in the revising part also. So I would just briefly go through this. So overall structure, it means like whether you have like introduction, conclusion, whether your thesis statement and your body paragraph, they sit well with one another. And the structure within paragraph, as we have mentioned about the Texas structure that we usually utilize for our body paragraph, or whether you are sticking closely to that, whether you have like clear topic sentence, whether you have elaborate on it through your explanation and all. And then the last part that we want you to focus on, the part about clarity. So the thing is that for academic paper, especially when I'm doing PAW, I have seen a lot of people, when you have a really complex matter to work with, it's really difficult for you to like somehow ensure that the clarity is sustained throughout your essay. So the thing is that because many times you have to use a lot of like specialized terms, a lot of like what they say jargon, right? So those are really hard for you to actually make it clear, right? And then sometimes we just go with we just go with the flow. You just include a lot of those jargons in your paper without explaining it. And then all of them appear to be really ambiguous, right, to the readers, to the audience, because obviously they have not done a lot of research on the matters as much as you did, right? So it's really hard for them to catch up with. So when we move on to clarity, you have to make sure that you all of those specialized terms that you have been using, all of those phrases that could appear to be ambiguous, you have explained them enough. Like not too much explanation, but just enough, just concisely enough for the audience to actually understand. Because overall, the essay, the main purpose of your essay is to deliver your opinion, and you want them to be able to understand that, right? So you don't always want to have like those really complex terms. And also for clarity, I think that a lot of us, we tend to use a lot of like complex sentences or like complex phrasing for our essay because we want to make sure that it stay academic. But then when you overcomplicate that, it means that people could not really understand that. So maybe sometimes you want to opt for a more simple manners to deliver your opinion, because simplicity sometimes it works better in that sense. Okay, let's move on to the next part. Okay, for proofreading, as I say, proofreading is the last, it's the last step that you want to do in your essay, right? So right here, you want to check for those really local concerns, the really minor mistake that you might have in your essay. But then sometimes they would, if these mistakes, they are repeated too much, then it might influence the overall, the overall understanding of your essay. So you want to be really careful with this part. I think a lot of people would skip this part. Like usually you guys would do like editing and that's it, because it's a long process of writing already. Everyone's get tired, and usually with proofreading, we would just skip this. But then it's really important that you want to look whether or not you have like any kind of like confusions in your word choice or like mistake with your spelling. I think it's common that usually we have like we misuse between like the definite and indefinite articles, just as like the, a, and usually we will like mix up those a lot, and sometimes it causes the confusion in your essay. Or sometimes we use the wrong prepositions, we use the wrong punctuations. We have like misuse of the commas and all. You want to make sure that you check for all of them. You look out for all of them. The second thing, which surface a lot of in a lot of our paper is about the stylistic inconsistency. So I think that some of us, we would be more comfortable with like the US or the UK spelling of words, right? But then there are times when we just like mix them up, and that kind of like inconsistency in the paper, it's not that significant enough, but to like actually cause any kind of like misunderstanding in your paper. But then it could be pretty unpleasant to see it like repeatedly in the paper. So you want to make sure that you fix that as well. Stay consistent, whether you are more comfortable with like the US way to way of like spelling or UK way of spelling, then you stick to that. Like inconsistent capitalization of terms or titles, this actually happens a lot also. So then you want to make sure that everything is like consistent throughout your paper, right? And the third one, the formatting issues. So this one actually, I think a lot of people actually overlook like the formatting issue in your paper, about the quotation, the citations that you have in your paper, whether you're using the right formatting or not. Pay attention to that. And also, it might appear to be like insignificant, but then also the paragraph indentation and the spacing. Make sure that you keep them like consistent also. Page numbers, headers and footers, all of those things are also like important to look out. And that's are basically the main things, the main subjects that you want to look at for your proofreading process. Okay, now let's move on to the next part.
The next part would be tips for proofreading. So, like Phoebe said, when you reach the proofreading stage, you're probably really tired by then. So what can you do to improve the proofreading of your paper? Do you have any tips for proofreading that you find useful, everyone? If you're willing to share, we'd love to hear it. So do you have any tips that you constantly go back to so that you can improve your paper? Anyone? We're going, okay. So Jordan said, get someone else to proofread it for you. Well, that's actually not a bad suggestion. Maybe at times you might need a fresh set of eyes to look at your paper. Yeah, that's one. Okay. Any other tips? Any other suggestions?
I think Dee said you should go to sleep and read it next morning with a fresh head and no memory of the essay. That's
That's
actually really good.
that's the really good advice also. Yeah, go to sleep and read it the next morning with a fresh head and no memory of the essay. Okay.
Okay.
Do the proofreading in the beginning before other parts. Okay, that's interesting,
Mm.
Tatiana, because what we're introducing here is actually the flow of the process when before you submit your first draft to your teacher. So you would focus on the really big issues first, like revising and editing, and then you would narrow down to the smaller issues like proofreading. Because when you do the bigger issues, sometimes you might uh, leave out some stuff that you put in there previously. And if you proofreading beforehand, you fix those stuffs, but then you throw them away, then it's just gonna be quite a waste of time. But thank you for uh, uh, your advice, Tatiana. So now we're going to introduce to you, I think, 7 tips to the proofreading process. Um, so the first one, like someone said in the chat, rest. So give yourself some time to have a fresh set of eyes. And after writing your first draft, before submission, obviously, if possible, take a day or at least an hour off, then come back to evaluate the paper. The time off like will allow you to avoid processing too much information at a time straight after writing, right? So yeah, like who said that? Or like Dee said, fresh had no memory of the essay. Definitely helped. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that usually when you read your essay, like when you try to proofread your essay just instantly, like right after you finish it, it's really hard for you to detect anything that's it's not well delivered because at that time you are tired. You want to be contented with what you have been writing, right?
Yeah.
So it's really hard for you to detect anything that you actually want to edit. So then usually take a rest, right? Or come back to it the other day, like Dee just said or Ming just said, it's gonna be really beneficial for you for your proofreading process.
That's right. And also like I think Jordan said earlier in the chat, go to find someone do the proofreading for you.
Yeah.
And our advice is kind of along the same lines, which is go to PAW. So I always say that when in doubt, seek help. So that's why we're here for you. PAWs can not only help you identify common mistakes in your paper, but also advise you on how to improve your draft further. And if you don't have the time and prefer a different medium, we really recommend you check out our PAW YouTube. We covered a variety of topics and answered a lot of writing related questions, and you might find something helpful there. Yeah. And another tips that I want to give is proofread backwards. So weird as it may sound, proofreading backwards can help you identify errors more easily. The reason for this is that sometimes mistakes are overlooked when you continuously read something at the same flow with a normal logic. So like you finish your paper from top to bottom, right? You've become familiar with your paper. It's gonna be difficult for you to make out the mistakes if you just follow the normal flow and the normal logic of your paper. Yeah. Phoebe, you want to do the carry the rest?
Yes. So moving on, there's another tool you could use for your proofreading is that you would seek help from the spell checkers. So usually when you do your writing, when you do your essay um on like Google Docs or like Word documents, they already have like the integrated spell checkers thing for you, and they would help you like have like detect most of the mistakes you have with your writing, with your like grammars or with your like structure, with your sentence structure. Uh, and I think that a lot of us, I have noticed that when a lot of you come to a pod and you have like Grammarly showing your paper, some of you even have like premium accounts. I mean, I would want that also. And these tools, they, of course, it's like we have to admit that they are really helpful, right? Especially for the long paper that you have, because it would help you like detect the mistakes, the textual errors much more faster. But then there are times when you would notice that the mistake that they detect is not the one that it's not really a mistake. Like sometimes they would give you suggestion on how to actually like correct your mistake, but then that's not how you want it to be written, right? So at first it might not be a mistake like from the very beginning, but it's still detect it. So then try to not rely too much on it. Try to be like really like wary when you use like Grammarly or any like spell checking tools, because they help. But then it's your paper. You want to have control over it rather than like relying on other tools on telling you what to write or how to write things. So
And oh,
yeah,
yeah,
please go ahead.
and Word programs like Microsoft Word, I think it can really easily get confused with sentences that are complicated, and word choice also. And eventually it might give you the wrong answer that you're looking for. Yeah, so just be wary of that. Use with caution. Yeah, I would say.
And then another thing that I have like suggested for a lot of students to have an attempt at is try to like read things out loud. Especially for those really complicated sentences, for those complex sentences that you have like multiple clauses within those sentences, you want to read things out loud, because in that way, somehow when you read things out loud, it means that you have to slow down your pace, right? Because when you skip through the essay, it's much faster, but when you read things out loud, you are forced to actually slow down your pace, and in that way, the the mistake or the errors that you might have, it's actually more visible to you. They would actually appear to be much more visible and detectable for you when you read things out loud. And um and another thing that you could try, that know your mistakes. So it means that after a few assignments, after a few attempts of like writing essay, you will start to realize that there's some kind of like mistake in the paper that you have repeated a lot, right? So when you know your mistake, when you're aware of the mistake you usually that usually repeat, then it's helpful to like take note of them, and then you could apply them to the future assignments to make sure that to kind of like prevent yourself from making those mistakes again. And then you can also refer to maybe your instructor comments in your essay, or like when you're doing like peer review, pay attention to those comments coming from your classmate. Could help also. And then the last one is the outline. So like usually I think for outlining, it's a more of kind of like, it's a more minor assignment compared to like your first draft, your second draft, your final draft. But then we should not like underestimate like the importance of outlining. So because your first draft, it comes like right after the outlining stage, right? So if you have a really clear and detailed outline, it will be like a really solid foundation for you to actually write your first draft. Um, and when and actually when you have like a really specific outlines already, your first draft, it's more of like just putting pieces together. It's going to be like much more easier for you to do that way. And you could also refer back to your outline after writing your first draft. in order to make sure that everything you are writing, it's going with the same flow. It's going with like the correct flow that you have initially expected.
So with that, we're going to the Q&A for today's section. So any questions about the steps to a better first draft, or any questions at all, you can just ask us in the chat or say it out loud.
I think right now, most of us, I think most of the students here, you guys are like at the stage of like finishing up the first draft or like revising by contact. So I think that those tips would be really like better, like it would be really, it would come in handy for you when you like proofread and like edit your paper. So is there any difficulty that you guys actually face when you do like the revising or editing and proofreading your paper?
Anything at all that you might, maybe is there any steps that you didn't understand when we mentioned it?
I
Yeah.
think someone raised their hand.
Hi guys. So I have this concern regarding the Turnitin. So I want to ask for your experience with the Turnitin. So usually when I submit my paper into Turnitin, then usually they have the suggest on the plagiarism and also with the grammar stuff. So yeah, usually they advise me to, like, for example, putting an article or maybe replace it with something else. But I think that some of them are not really suitable. So when you guys use it in the past, do you guys really like count it all on the Turnitin suggestion? So yeah, that's my question.
So that's a really interesting question, right? So for Turnitin norm, I think it's the new feature of Turnitin. I don't know. It also suggests you have to fix your grammar also.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and like we said earlier, if you, I think but then in other cases, after changing it, you might find it not the way you want. You might find it it's not really interpreting the idea that you want to get across. Right? So that's what you might want to so but so you're asking about that, right? But not the report of Turnitin, right? Not the percentage report, the similarity report, right?
Yeah, that's right. Like, I just want to ask, like, usually do you really like rely at all in the Turnitin suggestion? Yeah, because sometimes really confusing, because I'm feeling like it was fine, but what their suggestion is make the paper a little bit weird. So yeah.
So yeah, like we said, use it with your own judgment on the parts that Turnitin is suggesting, as similar to other softwares as well. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other questions, concerns that you want to bring up? Any problem that you find difficult during this stage, revising, editing, and proofreading? Okay. We have one. Okay. Do you mind sharing this PowerPoint with us? So we will not be able to share with you the PowerPoint, but the recording of this session will be on YouTube. Will be on YouTube. Yeah, and I think you can go to our YouTube channel and see the sections that you're looking for. We'll also leave you like timestamps so that you can navigate things more easily, obviously. Yeah. Anything else? Any other concerns? Okay. Oh, Tatiana asked a question about right. Thanks,
All
Dee.
right.
How to change citations to your opinion if you're overusing citations, or how to make an intro more concise. Okay. So you have two questions for us, right, Tatiana? So the first one is how to change citations to your opinion if you're overusing citations for it. So I think this brings us to paraphrasing. So one way to really absorb the opinion of a citation is to paraphrase. But if you want to make it your opinion, I think that's along the line of plagiarism, right, Phoebe? Yeah, it's along the line of plagiarism. But I would say that if you're overusing citations, then I think it's good for you to explore the analysis section of the text's paragraph, like I mentioned earlier, because the analysis section, you will basically interpret the citations, right? Like you will explain the implications of the author's finding of that citation without relying too much on it. Yeah, and that can be your opinion on a topic also. Yeah, but change citations to your opinion, I think that's along the lines of plagiarism. Yeah. And your next question, how to make introduction more concise. PB, I think you've done a project on introduction. Maybe you can take this question.
I think usually when talking about like having a concise, when trying to like write a concise introduction, because you guys know usually in an introduction, you guys have three main parts, right? So first you have a hook to actually try to catch the attention of the readers to your paper. And then you would have a kind of like a background, a part where you try to like talk about the general context, like some background information on the matters that you're trying to talk about. Then you're gonna make some transition for you to lead to the final thesis statement that you have in your introductory paragraph. So usually I think that the introduction tend to be lengthy. It's because of the part that you want to provide information for your background in the general context. Usually that part tends to be really lengthy because of course we want to provide as much information as possible. But then we need to also be moderate on that, because your introduction, it should not be something that's too lengthy. It should not be something that's too wordy, right? You want to keep it as concise as possible. So usually to keep it concise, you should pay attention on like not the quantity but the quality of the information that you put in your in the general context part. So in that part, you don't want to like include almost everything, right? Of course, you want to inform the readers about what you're writing about the context you're writing it in, but then just enough amount of information on that. So maybe perhaps the issue about like if you want to talk about blockchain technology, stuff like that, and you think that it's might be too complicated for your like audience to actually understand it, then just really simple definition for some specialized terms that you're gonna use in that kind of like general context or background information, it would help already. Don't try to be too like invested in that, because it might like lengthen your instruction too much, and it's gonna have like redirect the whole attention of your essay. And that way it's gonna be hard for you to transit it back to your thesis statement.
Yeah, thank you for that, Phoebe. So I hope that answers your question, Tatiana. And we have another one coming from D. If we're citing the same source several times in the paragraph, can the in-text parenthetical citation just say IBID? Actually, Phoebe and I were just talking about this. I think yesterday or a few days ago. And IBID is used in other styles like Chicago styles, and as I recall, we don't use IBID in APA citation.
Yeah. True.
If you're citing the same source several times in the paragraph, you would still need to include the parenthetical citation, the normal one, or you can just try another way of saying it. Yeah, but normally IBID is for other styles, not APA. Yeah. So we're only having 10 more minutes, around 10 more minutes to our session, to our workshop today. So if you still have any questions, you can like feel free to ask us anytime. And during the next 10 minutes, cite several times in the end in the same paragraph or just once at the end. So it depends, to be honest. So for example, if that paragraph you're only using that for that paragraph you're only using that particular citation, then you can consider using only one. You can cite once, and then later on in the paragraph mention like in the same article the author says that something something something. But then if your paragraph has more than one citations, which means for example, the citations you're using several times is separated by another one, you might want to mention it one more time. Yeah. So that it doesn't confuse the readers. So, Farina, I hope that answers your questions as well. Yeah. So like I said, we have around 10 more minutes, and Phoebe and I were going to give you the QR code to our feedback form for today's workshop. So feel free to scan it and then, feel free to scan it and then fill in the information for the attendance. Yeah. While this is happening, if you still have any other questions, you can ask us, obviously. And just let you guys know that we're going to maybe close the feedback form, maybe 10 minutes from now when this session is over. Yeah. So you might want to fill it in now.
A block quotation, so it means that like your quotation exceeds 40 words.
40 words, yeah. Block quotation. I think you don't have to italicize the whole thing, right?
Right.
I don't really remember that. I really use I can check.
If my memory serves me right, I think you don't have to like italicize the whole thing.
I think so, yeah. Let me see, in-text citation, the basics. Long quotations. Yeah, you don't need to italicize, but you need to indent.
Right.
Yeah, you need to indent the block citation, but you don't need to italicize. And I think for block quotations, you don't need quotation marks also.
Yeah.
because it's a
sure.
block already.
Mm.
Yes, you don't need quotation marks. Oh, thank you for your question.
Mhm.
So yeah, in the meantime, you can just fill in the feedback form, and maybe you want, if you still have any other questions, you can ask us. But otherwise, if you finished filling in the feedback form and you don't have other questions, you can feel free to leave the session.
So, is there anyone that has problem with scanning the code?
Yeah.
If you do have issue with the code, then please tell us. We're
Yeah,
gonna
we
try
can
to
see the link.
figure
Yeah.
that out.
I'm sorry, but if I'm coming here for like both ART and AC1 class, may I just like write the other class in the other
Yeah,
box?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, okay, thank you so much.
Is there a link? Phoebe, can you send in the chat the link?
Yeah. Okay. Please give me a few seconds.
Thank you for the tips, guys. Have a nice day.
Thank you for
Yes,
coming. Have a
thank you
nice
for
day.
coming. Hey, Min, can you please help me with the link?
Sure. Yeah. Oh, wait a
Cannot
bit.
copy.
Aisha, I'm gonna find the link for you. Okay. Here it is. One second. Wait, someone's joining now.
Enter
Yeah.
it now. Did
Yeah.
should I admit them?
Yeah, just admit and say we actually finished the workshop. So
Oh.
we're gonna stop recording. Phoebe, can you stop recording also?
Yes.